Welcome again to another Discover Trempealeau County show. We're traveling the back roads and byways here at Trempealeau County, discovering interesting things and interesting people. And today we're at Independence, and we're going to be looking at the St. Peter and Paul Church, a very, very elegant church here in Independence. It's quite an attraction for people in the community as well as outside the community. It's an outstanding church, and with me today is Betty Sobotta. She's from Independence. She's going to be our host for today's show. Betty, how long have you lived here in Independence?
I was born and raised in Independence, and I lived most of my life here.
So this is your home church then?
Yes. I was baptized in this church.
Betty knows a lot about the church on our motor coach tours that we have coming through the county. If we stop here, she's usually our tour guide. And this is quite a fascinating church, Betty, when you consider the time when it was built.
Yes.
It was built in
1895.
1895. Now just think of that. 1895, this town was plotted in 1876. Yes. 1876. That's when Independence was plotted. That's 100 years after the Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
That's where it got its name. And the railroad went through here about 1873. But prior to that, I think they had a little city that they called New City. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I was born in New City, in fact. It's about a mile out of town towards Arcadia. It was just, they had a mill there and a little, like they call it, a roadhouse, a tavern, hotel type thing. And you can still see some foundations are still there. But then when the railroad came through, there was a controversy as to where they were going to put the depot. And Independence site won out. And then New City just slowly died out. And Independence grew.
And New City was, is that in Travis Valley, or the outlet of Travis? Do you remember the dam that was there?
Oh, yes. My great-grandfather had a mill, and he used that dam. He was the one who was using the dam with his little mill, with his flour mill.
Well, that's interesting. Is there any remnants of that dam in existence today?
There were when I was a child, because we used to play on that little remnants of that dam. It was concrete, and we played on it, but I don't know if it's still there now. I don't play in concrete anymore.
So the railroad went through in 1873. New City kind of disappeared, and the railroads, wherever the railroads went through, that's where the town started to develop. And of course, Independence developed, plotted in 1876. And 19 years later, this church is built. The cornerstone, 1895.
Yes. Yeah.
19 years later. That means that many of the original people that moved into this area were involved with building this church.
Yes, they were. Yes. They had a small church previous to this, but this is the big church that they built. They would meet in people's homes, and then they had a little bitty church down below the hill, and then they came up here.
Can you tell us a little bit about the church? We're looking at it from the outside. Soon we'll go inside and look at the inside. The inside is what knocks the eyeballs off from people when they see all those stained glass windows. But could you tell us how long the church is, or how wide it is?
Well, the church was first built, when it was first built, it came to the area where those large windows are over there. It was 130 feet long and 54 feet wide. And then they added on the back end there, little apse of the church is added on. It's 30 more feet. So it's 140 and 30, 170 feet long. When they first contracted for that church, it was a $20,400 that came in as a contract. But then they overran the contract, so it cost them $22,000 to build that original church. Then in 1908 is when they put the addition on, and that cost them, I think it was about $15,000 to $18,000 more. So it was almost the price of the original church. But can you see what you would build today for that amount of money? It's amazing, isn't it?
Oh, it'd be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, it kind of interests me. The foundation of this church has some very thick rock. I'm not sure if it's limestone or if it's a good. I think it would be limestone, because limestone is long-lasting rock. But it's very thick. It must be over a foot thick. And just think of all the work it was involved in bringing that stone in here. You know, for just the foundation. That's before the bricks. You know, the amount of work and effort it took to get that foundation laid.
Just imagine those stonemasons, how hard they had to work to chip that stuff out and then to haul it. They didn't have end loaders. They didn't have the machinery we have today, and hauling that with oxen team and horses and buggy, and rather horses and sleighs and wagons, that was really very difficult.
Well, it's a big job, and here in Trempealeau County, limestone originates above the 1,200-foot mark. So the closest limestone quarries are the ones in the hills above Arcadia, or there's one on Silver Fox Ridge. That would really be the closest, just over the line there in Buffalo County, and very likely, if it's limestone, that would come out of those particular quarries. Now, it's got quite a steeple here. Do you know, by any chance, how high that steeple is?
Yes, just the other day we were talking about that, and it's 139.6 feet tall. And the cross on top is 14 feet tall. So that's pretty high.
That's a very high steeple. Just think of the people that built that church, and it's very elegant work in the brickwork, isn't it? And you think maybe the brick did not come from local sources?
No, that's not a local brick. The local brick was a softer brick. This is a higher quality brick. I don't know where it came from.
As you look at the outside, you'll see a lot of different forms in the brick. So there was a lot of artistry that went into making this church. And
yes.
Well, I think we mentioned this is a Catholic church, and the people were originally from Poland, right?
Polish. The people who came here were migrants from Poland, and they were very proud of their Polish ancestry. And most of the Polish people at that time were Catholic, and they came and they always liked to build an edifice to their God, and they were very proud of this. And by the way, you mentioned the stained glass windows. They were ordered out of Chicago, and they cost $760.
Wow. I'd be scared to estimate what they'd be valued today.
Yeah.
I imagine, a lot of this, since the railroad was going through here at that time, a lot of these things maybe came in by the railroad, through the railroad.
I would assume so. My husband talks about his father had talked about some people were hauling timbers by oxen from Winona, and the oxen were very thirsty, and they ran into the Mississippi River, and they drowned. The men who were driving the oxen wagon drowned. That was an accident at the time. I don't know the details on that, just something that his father remembers as a child that they talked about.
Now, I think I heard you mention at one time or another that this land was donated by a Markham family. Could you elaborate a little about that? Back, I suppose, maybe took a couple years to build, so in 1890-something, they donated this land?
There were 10 acres here. 5 acres were donated, and 5 acres were bought at the cost of $15. And so that's 10 acres for $15, a pretty good deal, isn't it?
And do you know anything about the Markhams? Now, I've heard about the Markhams. They came from, I think, was it England? And I've heard about the Markham Castle. I think I've even seen a picture of that somewhere. And I imagine that's the same Markham. The Markham Castle is just over this way, a quarter of a mile or so. And it was an octagon house, if I remember right.
Yes.
You know anything about the family or anything that donated this land for the church?
No, I don't know anything more than that. That's about what they were a very prominent family. They were farming people, and they were very good people. I remember when as a child, the Markhams were older people. There was a sister and a brother, but I don't know anything more about them than that.
Well, Betty, I think it's kind of a windy day. Maybe it'd feel good to get inside, and
yes,
you can talk to us about the church, the interior of the church. By the way, the exterior, at the door, there's some kind of a saying, I think in Polish maybe, as you enter the church. Do you know what that says?
The top word is kościoła. Kościół, that's church, and St. Peter and Paul. That's what it says. It's in Polish.
Uh-huh. Well, Betty, we're now on the inside of the 1895 St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church here at Independence. A beautiful interior. It's just awestruck, as you walk into this church.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. It's hard to keep your mind on the services, I think, when you come into something this beautiful. How big a congregation do you have here?
We have about 1,000 families now, but when it was built, there were 160 families who built this church. That's really pretty amazing how they had foresight to build for the future.
And the capacity, seating capacity, it looks enormous, the seating capacity here. Do you have any idea how many people would it take to fill it up?
You could probably fill it up with about 1,200 people.
Oh,
Easily 1,200 people.
you get it full once in a while.
It has been full. I can remember as a child, we had funerals, it was full. The people were standing in the back.
I notice there's a balcony above us, too. Is that a seating also up in the balcony, or is that for another purpose?
You can also seat there when it's overflow, but it's usually for the choir. Choir sings up there.
And it's just beautiful as you look down and around the church and look at all the carvings and the stained glass windows. It's just, and today the sun is out, some of the time at least, and when the sun is out, the stained glass windows are just absolutely stunning.
Now these windows are the windows that I mentioned previously, that they were ordered from Chicago by the church people here, and Mr. Wijgala is the one who they ordered them from in Chicago. And as you can see in the bottom, it says offered by so-and-so and so-and-so, and the people usually would get a window that was their patron saint. For example, that one is St. Adalbert, and that's Albert Bouch is the one who offered that, and that one is St. Thomas, and Thomas Pompo offered that. And Thomas Pompo, by the way, is the man who owned the land upon which independence is now plotted.
Well, are these original people then that were living at the time that the church was built in 1895?
Oh, yeah. Yes. People. These are the people who sacrificed to build the church.
And have the windows, have they had to do any maintenance or anything like that on the windows over the years, or are they pretty much just the way they were when they came from Chicago?
Well, they still look the same, but about 25 years ago, there was a lot of little cracks in the windows and the between the windows where they have a little sealant was going. The leading, yes, that's what it was going. So they repaired them and they put storm windows on. So from the outside, they're not as pretty as they are from the inside, and they aren't quite as brilliant as they used to be. But that was necessary because they're afraid of hail damage, and they are quite valuable at this time.
Well, they'd be extremely valuable. And the artistry, to think of the time that they were built or constructed, the artistry, just to make those windows are just amazing. Now, between the windows, I notice there's some little carvings or statuettes or whatever you want to call them there. Is there any significance to those, or do they mean anything?
Those are the Stations of the Cross. There are 14 Stations of the Cross, and during Lent, there's a special prayer that you start with the number 1 is over there, and you go right all through the church, and you pray at each little station until you get to the end, and it follows the resurrection, persecution of Christ when he died.
So there's 14 of those around the church here, and how are they made? Are they made out of wood or
I think
some kind of carving? Or?
Yeah, no, those are plaster. Most of the artwork in the church is plaster. Even the carvings of the columns are plaster, and the columns themselves are wooden, and they've got plaster over the top. That's not marble; it's plaster, and all the grapes and everything else, and all the raised portions are plaster, and the Stations of the Cross are plaster, as are the statues are also plaster.
These Stations of the Cross, were they original to them in 1895?
Yes, and the lettering underneath them, the wording is in Polish also.
Well, shall we continue walking down here? And
as we go down.
there's a statue to our right here that looks like maybe a statue of Christ, perhaps, or one of the apostles.
I think that's a statue of St. Joseph holding Christ, and Christ is a child.
Did they come from Chicago also? Some artisans down there, or?
The statues, I don't know. I think they I don't know where they came from. That's something else I don't know about.
Well, then we get down a little closer to the front of the church. We hit these huge, beautiful, gorgeous stained glass windows. And the sun is from the right side here, so let's look at that one first. Tell us about that stained glass window. That's just amazing.
It's a beautiful, yes. And that's a crucifixion of Christ. And there at St. Peter and St. Paul. St. Peter has the keys, and St. Paul has the scroll and the sword. And this is the death of Christ. And on the other side, on the other side of the church, on the left side of the church, is the birth of Christ. So we have birth to the death.
Oh, that's just amazing.
The sun doesn't come through as well here, so it can't see it as well.
Or this is kind of the north side,
Yeah,
so.
this is the north side.
But still, it's a beautiful, beautiful stained glass. And you said this is the birth of Christ. How about it's a picture of Christ, obviously to the right. How about to the left with a cross?
I don't know. No, that's not Mary. That's a saint, but I don't know what saint it is.
Mm-hmm. Boy, those windows are, they must be, 12 feet wide and maybe 20 feet high or something like that.
I don't have the dimensions.
But
they are large. They are large, yeah. They're very, very lovely.
Well, just think what that would cost in today's money, huh?
Oh, I can imagine.
It costs much more than your church originally cost, and then some maybe.
It cost more than $760 too, I'm sure.
That was a cost, did you tell me earlier, of all the stained glass windows? Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, off to the right of this beautiful stained glass window here, there's a cross, and that'd be a statue of Christ with
his mother. Mary. That's the Pietà. It's a copy of the Pietà, of course, but most of the churches have that in it. The suffering of Christ after he died. And in the front they have those are candles, votive candles, and people will light candles in prayer. The belief is that if you light a candle, your candle as it is lit, it is a prayer. Mm-hmm. And then next is the infant of Prague. That's also the Christ child. He's on the little stand. And as you go to the right, there is the baptismal font. Oh,
that's a beautiful baptismal font. Mm-hmm. Well, as many times I've been here, I think I've overlooked that.
You have?
Yeah. Yeah. Does that the top lift off the baptismal font then?
The top slides over. Mm-hmm. It just slides over to the right, or to I don't know right, anyway, to the side. I'm sure they used that to baptize me a long time ago.
Well, if it was here for over 100 years, I'm sure it might have covered your baptism. Yeah, that's original also then. Everything we've been looking at is original.
I would assume so. I think it's original or pretty close to being original because I never remember having anything other than that baptismal font here. And I want you to particularly notice the folds of the saints up there, how the folds of their clothes, the red velvet looks so velvety and the blue looks so velvety. Oh, yeah. Isn't that beautiful, the way they look so soft? You can almost touch it.
It looks real, doesn't it?
It does.
And they're stained glass, it's just amazing.
It's glass, but it almost it looks as though you could just touch it and feel the velvet. Mm-hmm. As we leave the stained glass, we pan to the right, and there is a side altar. And this is the altar of the Blessed Virgin, and she's in the middle with her son, the Christ child, and there are two patron saints there, and Saint Agnes is the one with the lamb, and Saint Catherine is the one with the wheel. And when people get married, and usually after the marriage ceremony, the bride will bring a flower and put it on the Blessed Virgin's altar in special homage to the Blessed Mother. Okay. And as you pan to the right, there's a pulpit. Before the days of the speaking system, the priest gave a sermon from the pulpit, so then the voice would go to the back of the church. It's very rarely used now. They don't use the pulpit.
I noticed above the pulpit, Betty, there's kind of like a roof or something. I don't know what they call that. What is that for? Is that just decorative, or is there something with the acoustics or something? Or?
I imagine the acoustics. So it keeps the sound from going up. It makes the sound go out. Because I've noticed a lot of pulpits that they have the same little, like a cupola on the top, I think just to keep the sound in. And to keep the rain out, too, probably. I don't know.
Well, from there, we'll kind of go up to the altar itself, Betty.
This is the main altar. And the main altar here has an icon of the Blessed Mother and the Christ child surrounded by angels. It's almost an exact replica of the icon that's above, the altar in Trempealeau, Poland, which is where most of the people of this area emigrated from. And it's quite unusual to see the same thing. We've had visitors come from Poland, and they are astounded to see that icon there. And if you look to the left, of course, is St. Peter again with his keys, and St. Paul with the sword and the scroll. And around the altar, there are little pillars that are being supported by angels on the top, around, as you go up and around the, what do you call that? The roof, the ceiling of the roof, yeah. Mm-hmm. And the angels are holding a shield, and on that shield is an eagle. That eagle is the Polish eagle. And as I've said on my tours, I've said, well, that Polish eagle is white. But the guy who painted the church was not Polish, so he painted them tan. But that is the Polish eagle. And it's funny that I was a member of this church since a child, and I never noticed that until several years ago. It came to my attention that they were eagles. The Polish eagle was on the shield that the angels are holding up the roof.
I've got to ask you, this is really intricate work on this, what do you call it? The altar area, very intricate work. Mm-hmm. Do you know, in all the side altars and pulpits and everything, do you know what kind of material that's made out of? Or it's beautiful. I mean, but how is it made?
It's wood. It's wood, and it's painted. It's carved in wood. When we were kids, we used to help clean the church. We used to go behind there. It's all wood.
Oh, well, you'd never believe that by looking at it. It looks like marble or something,
It does.
I imagine that's had to be painted a few times in the over 100 years that it's been in existence here.
Yes, I would assume so. The church has been painted about every 20 years. They paint it just for maintenance. It's been very well maintained, as you can see. It's beautifully kept up. And it's about due. They're talking about redoing it again.
Now, you mentioned the native church in
Trempealeau, Poland.
And that is similar in design as this church?
No, the church itself is a very different design. It's very modern, the church is, but the altar is very modern also. The only thing that's like this church is that little icon of the Blessed Mother with the child and the angels around. There are a little fewer, I don't know if it's fewer or more, but the number of angels are different, but it's the same thing. And they have the crown with the stones in the crowns, just like that.
It's kind of nice, a lot of churches, they change altars or they change something. I know the home church that I went to, they changed an altar, and there's a big controversy about it because, the older folks wanted to keep the old altar. And, of course, the newer people wanted the newer altar. But this has stood the test of time, hasn't it?
Well, quite well. When Vatican II came in the 1960s, they did change some things. There were large statues on the altar of angels holding large lights, and those have been removed. And they had a communion rail in the front, which was carved wood with the marble slabs on top. And that was removed, and they put the steps, as you saw, as we came up. But as a rule, it's been pretty well kept as it was. There were several things they wanted to dispose of. For example, there are chimes on the side of the door as you walk in there. Oh, yeah. And they wanted to dispose of them because they no longer use them. They used to use them. The altar boy would come out and he'd play them with a little hammer, and he'd go ding, 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 and you'd know the priest was coming. It would kind of forewarn the people. As
I look around the church here, I would guess there's over 200 either paintings or sculpturings or in the stained glass of prophets and Christ and people and saints. Mm-hmm. Over 200. I'd guess maybe well over 200.
Mm-hmm. If you just look around. Now the saints on the top of the church, there are popular Polish saints, or some of them are the apostles, and whoever was very important to the people at the time that this church was built.
You're talking about the ones way up in the air, in the ceiling area there.
Yes, yes. They are usually they're bishops and archbishops and saints and people. Like I said, that's Christ over there.
We're so far away from him, you can't see. Is there a name or something on the bishops up there? Not necessarily.
No, that too. I asked about who they were to identify them, and those plans are also misplaced. We don't know where those are.
Somebody's trunk somewhere.
That's right.
Okay, then we'll kind of swing around, and we just looked at the main altar. They got another side altar on the left, and now we're looking at the side altar on the right. Do you know the significance of the three altars, or?
Well, as a child, we used to have certain times of the year we'd have feast days, and we would use all three altars. They would have three priests saying mass, and one would use the main altar, and two other priests would pray at the side, would have masses on the side altars, a high mass there and two low masses. And there were certain ceremonies that took place on the side altar. They do less of that. There's less pageantry today in the church than there was in the past. This altar is the altar of Christ, of course, it's there. And the two side saints are Saint Stanislaus and Saint Albert. They were very important Polish bishops.
Except for the statues, these two side altars appear to be identical as far as design. Am I correct in assuming that?
Well, you assume that, but I, as a little girl, I used to sit in the pew here. My grandma's pew was number 8 over there, and I sit there and I count the spires, and they're a little bit different because there are a few little different spires on these. They're not identical. They're very much alike, but not quite identical.
You weren't counting when the sermon was going on, did you?
Oh, yes, I was.
Well, Betty, I guess this is kind of the conclusion of our tour. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I think we've done a pretty thorough job. I'm very proud of this church. I think it's a very lovely church, as I said. My parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents all are buried here, and I suppose I will be too someday.
It's a beautiful church, and it's pride of the community and pride for the whole county to have a church that looks like this. Mm-hmm. And we really appreciate taking time out from your busy schedule to be with us and conduct a little tour here of St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church here in Independence. And with that, I guess this is your host, Olin Fimreite. I'm glad that you have been listening, and we'll be in touch somewhere else in Trempealeau County on this Discover Trempealeau County series.